they say folks with bipolar disorder mania, right? They don't like to take their meds, or they're not compliant with meds, because when you're manic or have mania, you can think clearly and you write beautifully, and of course that's usually the case, and until you get so disordered that you get hurt. But with psychosis, it's even more complex. All right. Um, so a part of my experience with psychosis back then, 10 years ago, was I lost my speech. First it sped up, it became more and more pressured, and then more and more tangential, and then eventually I lost the ability to speak coherently. I was word salad, as they say. Like banana potato barbecue sauce, but paper. Who's going to make any sense of that? So I just stopped talking. So a part of my recovery was learning how to speak again. And for someone who was an English major and interested in one day becoming an English professor, you can imagine how disappointing and distressing it was that I lost my language. How ironic, right? But for psychosis, especially, people like to think of people as, they speak in word salad, or it's unclear, or they speak in tangents, it's not linear. But here's the thing, folks, right? When you're writing, when you're doing editorial, when you're blogging, when you're writing poetry, um, you should be able to pick the narrative approach that makes the most sense, and that could be given the audience, or it could be congruent with what happened to you, your story, or just your comfort level and way of delivering your message. So the whole point of me saying this was, don't let what happened to you and how it impacted maybe your language or your ability to speak or talk or your comfort level, don't let that interfere with your method of delivery and how you share your lived experience and how you talk about it. The only thing that should impact that is the audience and that you're speaking to, and your gut and knowing if you're going to reach them or not. I'm not going to walk in front of a crowd of collegiate ivory tower professors up there and start mouthing off to them and speaking in some sub language. What's a sub language? I'm making all this up. The point is, you speak in a way that people hear you, that are gonna glean something, the message. And the way I did that was I learned language over again. I had to relearn language, but I also relearned more than one. I learned the English language, how to speak and talk, but a social work language. I went to social work school, and I learned how to take all these languages and learn how they connect with my identity, and learn how to connect with others and engage with others in terms of their identities and what language is going to speak to them and where they come from, given their experience in life. So here's the piece that you want to think about as social workers. Okay. Now, when you're out there practicing social work, and you're under a code of ethics and this and that, and depending on what your role is, and why you're working with a client, and what brings you into the room and what brings them into the room, you want to think about self-disclosure and what it is you're sharing, right? So, sounds like I've had a lot of experiences, right? A lot of them. But I don't walk into the therapy room when I'm working with clients and say, yeah, 10 years ago I shat myself in bed, and I'm rolling around the feces. They don't need to hear that in the context of session 4, week 3 of their DBT, right? While they're working on anxiety. You feel me? You get me? So what I'm trying to say is, you want to take the pieces of your story, the pieces of that message, right? And when you're, disclosing it to an audience, whether it be a client in front of you, micro level work, the one you're working with directly, or macro in terms of your writing, and you're doing it for a publication, you want to think about those pieces of your lived experience, and which ones are important for that message, for that audience, for that medium.